Hello everyone, my name is Matthew, and on behalf of the organisers Oliver Kinross, I'd like to welcome you all to Meet the Contractor Week. This is just part of a week-long series taking place right through until Friday the 18th of September, so be sure to check out all of the virtual panel discussions and networking events still to come. Just a reminder that we have the second and final virtual networking session taking place tomorrow, so don't forget to register for this on the Meet the Contractor website. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, but with special mention of Flushmate, Elastic Stone USA, and Lixil, our sponsors for today's session. Today is a panel discussion on greener contracting, ensuring a sustainable supply chain. There will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so be sure to pop all of your questions into the questions box for the speakers to answer. Before we hand over to the panel, we just have a short video from our sponsor, Flushmate.
This isn't just a toilet. This is the next generation solution. More power, less water. This is Flushmate pressure-assisted water technology at its finest. Flushmate's reliable single flush performance and water efficiency, with no trade-offs. It might look like an ordinary toilet, but with the Flushmate system inside, it becomes anything but ordinary. Not only does Flushmate consume up to 38% less water than standard gravity toilets, Flushmate offers superior drain carry that clears the bowl on the first flush, up to 33% farther than the recommended ANSI standard. This powerful flush ensures fewer double flushes and clogs, and a consistent flush volume of 1.6, 1.28, or 1 gallon per flush every time. Our commitment to excellence gives you confidence and support for years to come. Pressure-assisted toilets with Flushmate have up to 50% larger water surface area. That larger surface and powerful flushing action keeps the bowl cleaner and reduces odor. And the water is contained inside the Flushmate system for a non-sweating tank and a dry floor. Designed with an advanced bowl and trapway, these toilets harness a powerful flush to push contents out of the trapway instead of pulling waste like gravity siphoning. They also boast a no-hassle installation process that fits the same dimensional area as standard toilets. Flushmate comes in 3 different models. The 503 with 1.6 gallons per flush, the 503H with 1.28 gallons per flush, and the 504, our most water-efficient model with 1 gallon per flush. Whether it's for a residential home or commercial business, Flushmate systems integrate well with the industry's leading toilet brands. You can even go hands-free. It's easy to convert to touch-free in minutes with just 3 parts. So when you're ready to upgrade to a better flush, everything you need is available on flushmate.com. So no, this isn't just a vessel, and this isn't just a toilet. This is more power, less water. This is Flushmate.
I'd now like to hand over to Blake Jackson, our moderator for today's panel.
All right, thank you very much for everyone for attending today. As stated, my name is Blake Jackson. I'm an architect practicing in Boston, Massachusetts. I work for Stantec, which is a global multinational practice that does everything from small interior fit outs all the way up to dams and everything in between. And my specific role is as sustainable design director for the US Northeast, located out of Boston, but serving other offices. And so we've invited a panel here today, a multidisciplinary panel, to talk about greener contracting and looking at ensuring a more sustainable pipeline. And so hopefully that's a value for you all today. Some of the things that we're going to talk about are common challenges and how we've overcome them in our daily practice, some innovations, and then just some good rules of thumb. We'll talk about sourcing the best practices for procurement and best procurement practices for sustainability in particular, and promoting reduced embodied carbon. And we'll talk about education that needs to be done, as well as advocacy work that needs to take place across the industry. And just because we've been green as an industry for a few decades now, doesn't mean that we're all the way there. So there's many things that we can do to continue our journey, and we'll talk about those today with our group of experts. So I'll ask them, starting with Nathalie, just to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about who they are and why they're here.
Hi, so my name is Nathalie. I am an architect at IBI Group, and I recently relocated actually from New York to Los Angeles. Very happy to be here on the West Coast, despite the smoke. I work on projects all over North America, including Washington State, New York, Toronto, Utah, and California. I am lead AP, BD plus C, and Well AP. I work primarily in two categories: transportation architecture, where I have worked on large-scale transit projects like Eglinton Crosstown LRT in Toronto, and bus rapid transit corridors in Washington State. IBI Group also recently signed 3 international sustainability agreements: the AIA 2030 Challenge, the UK Architects Climate and Biodiversity Emergency Declaration, and the Canadian Architectural Professionals Climate Emergency Declaration. And I have been helping IBI Group develop a system for how we're going to comply with those goals and metrics, as well as data reporting. And on top of that, I also do some minor sustainability and wellness consulting for the hospitality section of the IBI Group.
Wonderful. Soliman?
All right, thank you, Blake, and good morning, everybody. I am Soliman Khudeira. I am with the Chicago Department of Transportation, of course, here in Chicago. My role with CDOT is chief of major project section, the section chief of major projects, where we design and construct transportation. The T in CDOT is T is for transportation, so we focus on transportation-related projects, mainly roadways and bridges. Sustainability has been advanced for the past years in the building industry through the LEED and other programs. In the transportation industry, I think it's coming and it's becoming a reality through some other programs. Envision is one of them, and others. So we are designing and constructing transportation projects that's sustainable, and we have to. It's not a choice. So today, my area is transportation, so I will focus on what are the programs, what are the sustainability elements that we have been implementing in design and construction. Chicago has programs that pushes sustainability, encourage sustainability design, and some of those I will just very briefly list them. Chicago has more than or close to 2,000 miles of alleys, so we have a green alley program where it implements many sustainability elements. Bike lanes has been encouraged for the past, as I remember, for the past 15 years or so or more, to incorporate bike lanes as part of the roadway and bridge project. Permeable pavement is encouraged where possible. In the past 3-4 years, a smart lighting program has been ongoing, implemented under construction. A bicycle share program, I think it was implemented about 6-7 years ago. Landscaping elements are encouraged, required as part of any project that we design or construction. Again, those are just a listing of some of the programs, design element that we have been implementing. Some of our projects inherently are sustainable. They do help the environment, and one of those programs I know I am involved in is called the grade separation projects, where you separate the rail traffic from the roadway traffic, reduce idling, improve efficiency, and saves time. Recently, we have done a major project in downtown Chicago, which is BRT, bus rapid transit, where we have implemented many sustainability-related design elements and design concepts, like giving a priority to transit, make sure we include bike lanes, improve pedestrian experience within the project. It's about 3.5 miles BRT project in downtown Chicago. We have also implemented, CDOT has implemented wind and solar in a transportation project where feasible. And finally, we also, sometimes those sustainability elements or ideas come through the contractor during construction, of course, because contractors are not involved, during the design process. But we have implemented at least 2 ideas came from contractor, and I would clearly classify them as sustainable construction practices. And we looked at the ideas, studied them, and implemented.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. As you can see, these guys are really busy, so we're lucky to have their time today. Let's go next to Jennifer, please. Oh, Jennifer, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
No
Hi, I'm Jennifer Cass. I'm a Senior Vice President in the New York City Economic Development Corporation in the Capital Program. EDC is an economic driver for the city. We look to build strong neighborhoods and communities and add jobs into the New York City environment. We, in the capital program, we have a diverse portfolio, so we're really able to look at sustainability through a bunch of different lenses. I lead a portfolio that includes working with New York City DEP's Green Infrastructure Program. We are building the largest portion of that Green Infrastructure Program for the city. Hundreds and actually thousands of bioswales, marine gardens throughout the city. And we're also working on several resiliency projects, which I really consider as a subset of sustainability. That includes the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Project, as well as a project called Raised Shorelines that evaluated sea level rise throughout the city and targeted locations that were not being addressed through other projects. And I just also wanted to mention we are constructing the city's first net zero library in Staten Island. So there's really a lot of different opportunities that we have to contribute to sustainability through the city. And, it could be through buildings, open space, waterfront projects. My background is in environmental and civil engineering. So, back in my day when I was starting out, we called it environmentalism, or, we didn't really have sustainability programs. So it's really great to see these things taken off and everyone being part of it, including the contracting community.
Thank you very much. And then last but not least, John.
All right, thank you, Blake. Good morning, everybody. I am John Bello. I'm a project manager and sustainability lead for Skanska USA Building. I'm working here in Portland, Oregon. I'm actually seated at the Portland PDX Airport. We're building a terminal core redevelopment project. And Skanska, if you don't know Skanska, we are a international contractor developer based out of Stockholm, Sweden. We've committed to carbon neutrality across all business units by 2045. And I've had the pleasure of working with Skanska starting in New York, and then New Jersey, Los Angeles, Czech Republic, and now Portland, working on projects certifying under LEED, WELL, and Envision. It was part of the effort to get the first Envision Platinum certification for a transit project from Los Angeles to Santa Monica, and now we're pursuing LEED Gold here in Portland.
Wonderful. So thank you all very much for those great introductions. As the audience hopefully can see, we've got a panel of multidisciplinary experts, and so we'll start with some questions here. Just since this is Meet the Contractor Week, one of my favorite questions that I get all the time from contractors: how can we be more green? How can we be more sustainable? And as an architect, that's a bit of a conundrum because I always push back and say, you guys are as good as we can document. And I think that's a terrible answer. So I'm gonna throw out the answer to our experts to talk about what they think that world and that discipline can do. Because as we brought up, as Soliman brought up in his introduction, a lot of times the contractor is the last person on the field. And I think one of the things that we're trying to challenge right now is to bring them on earlier, even just as an advisor, perhaps, to influence decisions that are made in design that will have an outcome for carbon and procurement and other things in the construction process. So maybe we just go down the line and we'll maybe work our way backwards from John and just each one of us say what they think can be done. I think starting with John too is an easy one, just because he mentioned that they're moving towards carbon neutrality as a company. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and some of the other efforts you got.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an easy one. It's definitely challenging, but it's really a threefold effort. I think bringing a contractor on early is definitely paramount to the success of the overall project. Working alongside designers and owners, we can explain what is constructible, what is feasible, what is available in the supply chain, and that can help influence the design. So I definitely think it's important to get the contractor involved as early as possible. But it works laterally. It needs to, it can't really be a top-down approach, what might be a conventional approach. Sustainability really involves a lot of collaboration. You can think of it as you're like baking a cake, right? You have to have a successful cake, delicious cake. You need to have a good recipe. So figure the designer, might be, Rachel Ray making the good recipe, and we as the baker of the cake take that recipe and then go to execute that and go to the market to procure the materials needed to build that cake. But the thing that we're working through that's difficult now is when we go to the market, the visibility of available products that are more sustainable. Your organic flour or sugar, you don't have those facts that are, easily accessible. That's some of the challenges that we're working through. So, whereas if I could continue with this analogy, you have your nutrition facts when you go to buy food, but for contractors, we're having to rely on environmental product declarations, EPDs, or health product declarations, HPDs. So that's what informs us what's in the products that we're buying. So to take that full circle, the owner or the designer might have an intention that we want to have a highly sustainable, low carbon project. But when you look into the weeds, how do we even define how much carbon is embedded into the material we're buying? How many toxins? Well, that's the information that the EPD provides us. So us as the contractor, we kind of have to work on both fronts. We inform the designer, and we also have to inform the suppliers of this is the information we need you to provide to us. It's not a conventional approach. There's been some legislation that's been passed to mandate EPDs on public projects. So that's will help over time. But we need to be successful now. And that's why us as the contractor, we have to work with the suppliers to explain, we need these EPDs. We need to know what's in your materials. We need to buy, local products. And that's how we can have a successful project and a delicious cake.
Wonderful. Well, I love cake. Jennifer, what are your thoughts on this? What can you guys do? Especially for you and Soliman, this is interesting because you guys, I imagine, write a lot of RFPs. You're always thinking on big project, big term, affects a lot of land and real estate and jobs and things like that. So from your perspective, outside of the day-to-day of the individual projects, or individual building by building or road by road or street by street, what are you guys seeing that you can contribute on your ends? We'll start with John.
Yeah, I think just bringing off of what John was discussing at the beginning of his statement, ways that we can bring the contractor onto the project early by looking at other alternative delivery methods. So other than design, bid, build, looking at design, build, or integrated project delivery being applied to infrastructure projects, and getting, more contractor involvement at the beginning, I think leads to a lot of different innovation, and sustainability can be one of those innovative measures. The other thing is, just for projects for the majority of our projects are design, bid, build. We're really just starting to dip our toe into design build in New York City. as well as IPD. And but there's ways that we can just be more open to entertaining contractors, shop drawing submittals for different sustainable projects, and incorporate that into our RFPs. I think a lot of times we're in such a rush to get a project done, or there's this fear that sustainability is going to increase the cost of the project, which is not necessarily true, especially over the long term of the project. So we really encourage our contractors to come to us with ideas, and that includes our construction managers who hold the EDC construction contracts, but as the subs and the trades to come to us with innovative ideas that can either save money or increase the sustainability of a project. And just as long as we are meeting the metrics that we need to, even if we're slipping the schedule by a little bit, but we're going to be reducing our impact in either carbon or energy usage, or even impact to different natural resources. I think that's something that we are starting to overlook now that there's such a focus on carbon. We really still need to keep our eye on how we're impacting natural resources, whether that be erosion and sediment control, or wetland impacts, or endangered species. I think a lot of times we think that's been checked now and everyone does it, but how many of us walk around on the street and see concrete spilling out of a site or sediment spilling out of a site, and that's going into our sewer and our waterways?
Interesting. And I'll pose the same question to Soliman. And one of the things that we discovered from our pregame summit that we had last week is that some of the work that you're doing, Soliman, has it's not just gray infrastructure, but it's also a blending of gray and green infrastructure. And so how are you seeing the procurement process unfold, and what are the opportunities that you're seeing relative to that shift towards sort of a blending of the two forms relative to transportation?
Yeah, thank you again, Blake. So how can we blend those two, the building and transportation industry? How can we be more sustainable in the transportation infrastructure, design and construction? John brought a good point that I think one way is to get the contractor involved as early as possible. I know we try, but there are also procurement restrictions that in a standard design, bid, build, Jennifer mentioned those conventional contractual vehicle that we use. It's very difficult to contact one contractor. So if we need a contractor opinion during the design, what we have done is you cannot give all the information to the contractor. You have to stay general, and we did that for the interest of the project. You have to be fair to all future bidders, future contractors. Design build, Jennifer mentioned that it's a perfect vehicle for involving the contractor. That's the nature of design bid project rather than design bid build. The contractor is involved almost from day one. With the architect, with the engineers. So I think it's a model that's not fully used in transportation project, but there were some projects that utilize this vehicle. Another idea is how do you end up designing more sustainable project is through those two communities, if I may call them communities, the design community and the construction community. I think there are many webinars, many events that fits both of them. And I know I'm involved in local here in Illinois engineering associations where we go out of our way to make sure that there are designers, there are suppliers, there are manufacturers and contractors come to those events because the topic are of interest to both. As far as just an example, maybe from my experience, where sustainability element was included as part of contractor initiative. the contractor came back during construction, of course, and suggested, and I highly encourage contractors are, they are there in the project, the design team try to anticipate all the elements, but sometimes ideas come from contractor, and I will just briefly cite one of them. We had a major project that the construction period was about 4 years, and one of those elements, we were digging a tunnel, and they were structurally sound soil that came out of digging the tunnel. It was clay and salt. It's perfectly structurally acceptable type of material that could be reused in another embankment that we were going to do in the next phase of the project. That program was divided into multiple projects. So the contractor actually came back and said, I know that you have another project coming. Why am I going to take all this material and dispose of it in a dump site? It's costly. It's not environmentally friendly. It's not a sustainable product. Can you consider you reusing them in another project? So we looked at the type of material, we assessed the cost saving, and we ended up accepting it. The challenge was, there are always challenges. Where do you store this massive material? Because the other project was not yet ready. It wasn't even bid. So we took a calculated risk where we accepted the proposal from the contractor. We identified a nearby, very large site, relatively large site, and we end up, of course, the municipality got a credit, the project got a good amount of a credit, and the contractor, of course, saving in those contractor initiatives. I would put them in the realm of value engineering proposal. The savings almost 50% to the project owner and 50% into the contractor. So it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Wonderful. And Nathalie.
Hi, yeah, a lot of great things have already been said. I definitely agree with a lot of them, that there needs to be collaboration with the contractor as early as possible, which not all delivery methods allow. I have worked on design build transportation projects, large scale, and what I found working through that experience is that you actually do get to think a lot more about what the contractor needs. We were actually asked to do a BIM model with modeling 1-inch conduits inside a large transit facility. It was, 2 major entrances, 1 large underground corridor leading to underground tunnels. And that's something that's normally not requested at the design stage. And that was done specifically to facilitate the contractor. We've done, material quantities as well from our BIM models. And what's great about that is that it does actually allow us to collaborate with the contractor a lot more, and we understand the building a lot more. Something that I found working on that, though, is that there is a bit of a shifting of risks. When the materials are coming from BIM models, we have to make sure our BIM models are designed correctly, and that takes more labor up front. And then as well, same thing with the conduits, right? Those are things that normally don't get figured out in design, but now we have to figure out in design. So I think there's a lot that needs to be resolved as far as scopes and roles and responsibilities and risks and liabilities. Turning back to sustainability, though, I think, emphasizing the whole life cycle of a project. The construction is only the first 15% of the cost of a building, and that's just a standard building. And I think we need to be smart about making decisions at the construction stage and at the design stage that will facilitate sustainability all the way through the life cycle. And that can be very challenging because, we're talking about supply chain on this webinar right now. And our materials oftentimes, as John mentioned, we don't know where they really come from. We don't have all the EPDs and the HPDs. And oftentimes the manufacturers and the vendors don't really have that information either, because they're buying from a lot of other vendors and suppliers as well. So you need everyone in the supply chain to be able to get in line and start providing this information. And that could require, legislation coming down from government. I think that's probably the easiest way to mandate it, nationwide. But then also moving on through to other elements of the supply chain, right? There are a lot of ways that we need to break out of our own silo. So for example, right now we're talking about construction, but we forget about the people who live inside of our buildings. Let's say they're going out you want food, water, and shelter, right? Those are the three things that humans need to survive. And those are the three things that we need to really be working on making more sustainable. And while the shelter is what we really focus the most on, I think there are a lot of ways that we can implement food and water into the construction space, right? So during our meeting last week, I actually brought up that I have a hydroponic vertical garden that could very easily be integrated into my wall. And if, you know, all buildings, all people have access to a hydroponic vertical garden inside their buildings, you know, you're able to reduce a lot of agriculture demand that's currently happening, right? And right now, all of our agriculture in the United States is mostly monocultures in the Midwest. And trying to ship all that produce across state lines and sometimes even across nations can be very demanding on the environment and on greenhouse gas emissions and all these other things. The amount of pesticides that are being used, all of that can get reduced if you have, you know, a distributed farm within the cities. And I'm rambling on a little bit here, so I'm going to bring it back to the point. Which is that I think that we need to think a little bit outside of the box being our building. You know, how can we disrupt the entire system? This is a collaborative process. We do need multidisciplinary coordination, right? And it doesn't just have to be architects, engineers, contractors, owners. It can also be other industries, other areas, right? How can we bring the whole pie home? So I'll end it at that.
Wonderful. Well, we like rambling on. I know it's on one of these two records behind me. Actually, it's a great song. Led Zeppelin fan here, but anyway, we'll get back to the point. So, you know, you guys, we've had really good, or at least I've been fortunate enough to have really good luck with CMs on board early on in projects, specifically when we're doing selective demolition, phasing of projects. One project in particular, we were trying to add a garage, weave two buildings together that all had different floors, and there's a lot of complexity. And we came up with 4 various different options for how we might do that. And it was interesting because we were all kind of taking bets internally as to which one would work the most sensibly. And we had our favorite, and the CM came back and they had a very different outcome. And they just presented the dollars to do each one of the options. And we found it very counterintuitive, the one that was the cheapest. And you know, it actually worked out really well for everybody because we honed in early on an option. We got some pricing in early and we moved forward with the best option as opposed to advancing multiples and eating up all the time. And it was really interesting, and it taught me a lesson pretty early in my career that, you know, we have, you know, architects generate ideas for buildings. That's really that's what we do. It's why it's hard to get paid in this industry sometimes, because ideas are sometimes perceived as being free and easy to give away, and we're a little too ready to give them away. But the construction industry really controls cost in a profound way, because you can't just look up the price like you can, you know, go to Amazon and look up the price for a book and shop around for the best price, you know, and that's a little esoteric to me. So maybe my next question will be a little bit about process and how do we, because we've talked a lot about welcoming that discipline to the table early. And I don't know that anyone in the audience thought that that would be how we would start this. I didn't know that that was going to be how we started it, but it's a very kumbaya moment, and I'm happy that we're having it. But let's talk a little bit about alternative delivery methods, IPD, specifications relative to that, because that's really going to attack the supply chain. So how does that look, and why is it so prevalent in other countries and we're lagging behind? And we'll work our way backwards from Nathalie, and we'll end with John. So what is your experience with IDP, and what do you see as holding it back in your opinion?
Oof, that's a really good question. I I don't know if I'm the best person to answer it. So can you repeat a bit just a point of that question?
Well, to me, what was interesting about the previous question that went back around was that IPD and alternative delivery methods came up in a few different people's talks. And it just got me thinking about that as a potentiality, right? And so, you know, we're Stantec, we're a Canadian company. We do 3P projects, or P3 projects, excuse me, all the time up there, especially large healthcare, academic projects. Here, it's a little less common. I know in my practice, I only have one client that does a version of IPD. We don't do the true circle of friends. So I was just curious as to what's holding us back from that as an industry. And you know, if you've had no experience in it, that's a point too, I think. What about Soliman and Jennifer? What do you guys think about that? What's holding us back in terms of alternative delivery methods that could potentially enable better and closer collaboration?
Yeah, I can start off. At EDC, we're looking into using IPD, but we have not yet. I think it's traditionally been thought of as a tool for the healthcare industry, and especially, I mean, it's thought of as a tool for healthcare and buildings. And when we're talking about, you know, heavy civil construction, it's sort of like glossed over, or, you know, you don't see it being used very often, at least in the US. And so it's not even on the radar of a lot of folks. So we're starting to look at it. The obstacle for us has really just been, you know, having to set up a new contracting paradigm. And that takes time, that takes effort and expertise. We did the same thing when we did our first design build contract. You know, we had to write an entirely new contract to start that project. So I think it's really just a lot of the education of folks and how this could be applied to civil work or work outside the healthcare field, and, you know, doing the groundwork of setting up the contracts, making sure that folks are covered. But, you know, I know folks that have worked on these projects and they've been very effective. And then sometimes the projects are not more effective than a DBB. So, you know, trying to take those lessons learned also when we're going at it for the first time.
For in transportation, we have been using the traditional design, bid, build. Design, build, I'm going to say, unfortunately, is not used, at least from my limited experience in transportation. However, I know two cases where the city of Chicago did utilize a design build project, not in transportation. I should say not fully transportation project. The first one was years ago, which was building the Harold Washington Library on downtown, and that was purely a design build project. See, there's a very interesting video that if somebody is interested, I think it's in YouTube. Just watch that. It's called, I think it's called Design Wars, where teams from all over the world competed. The finalist 5 was very interesting to me. I'm not an architect, so I learned something from architecture from just watching the video. So there were 5 finalists, and the design of those 5 finalists is like day and night. They're different, totally different from each other. But that was the first design build in a non-transportation, of course. The other design build was, I think about 5-6 years ago, the city wanted to build a Terminal 6. We have 5 terminals here at O'Hare International Airport, and that was also a design build procurement method. Apparently in building, it's a method that's used more and more, but not in transportation, at least from my experience.
Yeah, so to comment on that, you know, I think Blake's point, which you were trying to get at, is P3 is not used heavily in the United States, but it is used dominantly in Europe and also in Canada. The P3 design build projects that I worked on were in Canada, and Toronto is essentially rebuilding their entire light rail system using the P3 design build method. So I think there are a lot of references that we can use to rewrite our contracts and do all that work. I think from my experience, and it is very limited, I think the issue is really with making sure that the contracts are set up within the United States, and that we're taking the steps on the policy side to make sure that we allow for P3 design to happen.
All right, and before we bring John in, I just want to remind the audience to post any questions that you have, and we'll be sure to get to them at the end. But just keep those coming in, please, because we want to make sure that you have a chance to pose your thoughts and experience to the group. So, John. please continue.
So I've had a lot of success with design build projects. I've seen that they really do foster a lot of good, productive collaboration. I would like to touch on one thing that Soliman mentioned earlier, and that's identifying byproduct synergy opportunities. I don't think he called it that, but that's really what it is us as the contractor, when we have waste accumulated on the job, that can be valuable, and oftentimes it is, especially because of the large quantity of materials that we are using and consuming, and ultimately disposing of. Now, conventionally, we're talking about alternative practices. Conventionally, we would, it's seen as you're successful if you're diverting the waste, right? If you're getting away from the landfill. And yes, that was kind of the first step. But now we want to kind of close the loop there and upcycle our waste. It's hard pressed to get contractors or even just the everyday person to recycle. Now internationally, that's embedded in the culture. We have, if you go really anywhere in Europe, you'll find oftentimes 5 or 6 trash bins, color coordinated labels. It's very simple. And now if you scale that up to the contractor side, the large materials that are accumulated on the job can be used for other projects. Now, for us as contractors, we have tunnel vision. We're focused on building the project. We don't have as much exposure as, say, someone on Soliman's level who is building multiple projects for a city, where, if we're brought on early on, we can identify opportunities, areas where we'll have a lot of waste, other projects that might be able to benefit, that will really cut down on the carbon footprint for us as a contractor, and the next contractor, and that's really going to help the city as a whole. The problem is that if you just push, okay, contractor, I want you to identify these byproduct synergy opportunities, give us a solution. I'm going to tell you, I need 2 or 3 laborers, I need a forklift, I need several hundred pallets that I can palletize all of this material. I need to pay for transportation, and I'm going to give you a big bill. And that's just the reality of the situation. And it's something, it's a challenge that we have to work through. Is this is what we want to do? This is the reality of the situation. This is how we can get there. And it really takes us all looking at the big picture, working together as a collaborative to make to be successful.
Sounds to me like there's a burgeoning industry waiting to happen in terms of architectural salvage. I've heard of a few companies. We had a really wonderful BSA, Boston Society of Architects, 12-part session this summer on embodied carbon. And there was a purveyor of doors who goes out and collects doors and repurposes them and puts them into new and existing buildings. And it was really interesting because they were very forthcoming with their best practices to try to inspire others to do the same with other types of materials. Some manufacturers are doing this. Certainly the carpet industry has cleaned up its act. I grew up in Dalton, Georgia. That's where they make 90% of the world's carpet. And it's fundamentally changed how that entire industry. ACT, they have take-back programs. So why don't we talk for a moment, just rapid fire here, and we'll go backwards from John and in with Nathalie here. Are there any silver bullet products or best practices that you could recommend or promote, or at least cite from your experience that have helped you to really push the envelope in a big way?
So sorry, you kind of cut out there, Blake. Can you repeat the question?
I'm asking the 15-part question, so let me rephrase that. Are there any silver bullets, whether they be products or tools that a contractor might use for procurement, that you might recommend that our audience could look into further, just to learn a little bit more about, environmental stewardship, procurement, and carbon reduction practices? I know you guys are using EC3, for example, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, EC3 is definitely a silver bullet, and I'll touch on that. The the first thing I want to say is that you really need to break it down with your carbon initiatives, your energy initiatives, your water initiatives, your initiatives towards biodiversity and ecology. If you focus on those few aspects and narrow focus on optimizing solutions for each one of those categories, you'll have an overall successful, sustainable project. Oftentimes, people look at just doing solar panels on a roof, and you can point at it and say that's a sustainable project, but that's not how it works in the grand scheme of things. Now, I mentioned early on about EPDs and the need for EPDs, and from a more practical standpoint in terms of procurement, we need to have a catalog of EPDs, because I need to know which product is better than another one. And the EC3 tool, which is the embodied carbon for construction calculator, it's a catalog that we use and can do a quick search by material type and identify which is our most sustainable option with the least global warming potential, or least embodied carbon. And one way that we were successful on the PDX T-Core project that I'm working on now is we got it down so far that we were able to filter our concrete mix designs by strength, by aggregate size, narrowed it down to suppliers within a 10-mile radius. And then even more so, we had 5 or 6 mix designs that we were going to need. We looked at, okay, what is the average in the area, and we worked with the design team to say, okay, this is kind of the industry average. This is what we need to do to get a 20% reduction of the project overall. So this is what I need you to write into your spec. And even more so, if we want to push this and go for a 40% reduction in carbon, I want you to put in a target goal of the 10th percentile GWP in the region. So now you're making it a competitive platform, because now when I take that bid, which has now so much information, granular detail information, I hand that to multiple concrete suppliers. They now have to compete against each other to be not only better in price and quality, but also better in terms of carbon. And that's what the EC3 tool does. And it really, narrows the focus, and yeah, you can call it a silver bullet.
And what I've learned is really good about EC3 too is that if you find there are categories of products that don't have environmental EPDs, it actually gives you a template whereby which you can begin to request them from different manufacturers. And I think that's one lesson from our last conversation, is that there's still a lot of advocacy work to be done and educational work to be done. And I think that all of us, whether we're designers or on the procurement side, can play an active role within that. So I believe we're at about 10 minutes till the hour now. So I believe that we need to hand it over to Matthew again, just for a quick video, and then we'll get to any questions that are coming in from the audience thereafter, or we'll continue our discussion.
Thank you. So yeah, before we move into the Q&A section, and to give all the attendees time to submit your questions to the panelists, I'd just like to play a short video from our sponsor, Elastic Stone USA.
I think this material is amazing. I'm excited to see it. I wasn't expecting this. It's amazing.
It's an industry game changer. I love it. It's great.
Perfect. I'd like to pass back over to you, Blake, for the Q&A.
Okay, wonderful. So let's see. Let me go to the top of the list here and we'll work our way down. So we had a few that came in. So we have one for everybody. So if you haven't, let's see. Oh, let me scroll down one more thing. Okay, so we had a question here that said, would agencies like NYCEDC or Chicago DOT consider bringing in contractors early for VE meetings as a requirement to optimize savings? And or is it already part of a mandated process that other public agencies can learn and benefit from? So Jennifer or Solomon, you guys want to jump in on that? And you may still be muted just in case.
Yeah, I can. We do often bring in other construction managers. We have a retainer for construction management firms, so occasionally we will bring in then I'll be the construction manager to give VE comments, not a formal VE process, but you know, give a review of our schedule or our cost estimates. It's a little bit tricky when we're talking about doing that with contractors because I think Solomon was alluding to us before, you know, you don't want to give them too much information and then, you know, have to preclude them from bidding on the job later, or in some cases you may have to preclude them and then contractors are not interested in contributing to that early process without the payoff later. So it's kind of a balancing act.
As far as as part of our VE value engineering process, we do have a constructability expert who's part of the team. He's part of, I should say, design team, not part of the contractors. The challenge in inviting contractors to a VE team is which contractor do you invite? So that's a big challenge. So we limit it to somebody from the construction industry who's an engineer but works for the designer, not as part of the construction team or industry. We also, what we do, we hold in Chicago pre-bid construction pre-bid meetings where we invite all contractors. It's open to anybody, and we present the project to them. That's a requirement, procurement requirement. And then they have chance to ask questions. They know the project. During the bidding process, they could not suggest modification, but at least they are informed. That gives them a good head start on the details of the project. There is a procurement limitation that we have to meet, so that preclude us from inviting a contractor, specific contractor, to be part of the design team.
And
All right, another question that.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment on that real quick. I am working on a bus rapid transit project right now, a few of them actually in Washington State, where we have a CM team on board and they were brought in a little bit late. And part of the issue that we ran into from the design side is that it was a very highly phased and highly complicated project because it was just so phased. And we had to make a lot of unconventional design decisions in order to be able to make the phasing work. And one of a lot of the arguments with the CM have come to terms with them trying to value engineer a lot of the odd phasing design choices that we made. And sometimes it's really hard to describe that kind of information, especially when we can't give too much away, too much of the details away. So I just wanted to drop in and provide a little bit of my experience on that.
I feel like even a closet renovation now is a confidential project. So we got two questions that kind of are the same. So I'm going to do my best to blend them together. And I want to make sure that we all get to talk about this because it's something that's affected all of us very recently. So two questions, blend them together, and I want everybody to answer before we depart. So question part A is, how do you think COVID will affect reaching sustainability goals? And then secondly, due to the tight resources and uncertainty caused by COVID, will sustainability be pushed to the side? And let's start with John, and we'll work our way back.
Oh, I definitely don't think it's going to get pushed to the side. I think you're adding more emphasis to one aspect of what our agenda already is, and that's health and well-being. Working with the well certification or Fitwell, they provide a lot of criteria. There's new standards coming out for operation and maintenance protocols to provide them a healthier working environment. So no, and I don't think we can afford to push sustainability in terms of water optimization, energy optimization, ecology, and optimizing our supply chain. We can't push that agenda to the side at all. And you can see here with the wildfires and other natural disasters that are going on, the social uproar, which is also part of our agenda to improve diversity, inclusion. It's all part of the agenda. So I think COVID, 2020 as a whole has been a year of focus, a year of reflection of what our goals are, where we need to put our attention, because we all want to build, but building sustainably, healthy and inclusively needs to be at the top of the agenda, no matter what.
I think that some would argue that COVID and other potentially future pandemics are systematically caused by climate change. I mean, not to let's just end it there, right? But I mean, like ones could argue for or against it. I'm more of an argue for that, but to each their own. But the issue is that we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I think what's really great, I remember when I'm glad you brought up well, because I remember when I first read the well building standard, I thought this is a really great, there's just a lot of really great ideas in here. I was concerned that it was going to push resource utilization up, because suddenly we're talking about increasing ventilation when we had been decreasing it for years, but for very good reasons on both sides. But clearly the buildings are for humans, so why not make their well-being and productivity as best we can. Same thing with lighting. I thought, geez, they're going to take away our low-hanging fruit that hit our energy model, where we don't have aggressive clients or budgets. And what we found in executing some of those projects is that the technology has caught up to where we can have our cake and eat it too. We can provide these quality metrics that Well is looking for, without providing quantity. Negative aspects of that. We're upping the wattage, but the fixtures are so much more efficient than they were 10 years ago. Now LEDs are ubiquitous and not just a special item, for example. And because we can change the color, we can achieve the circadian lighting effects and things like that. So I think that we're moving in a direction. Not to hijack the question there, but this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. Is that I think that we can have both. I think we have to have both. So we are at 11 o'clock, and I just want to say thank you to the audience. Thank you to the panel for making time for this today, and we'll turn it back over to Matthew and the USA Build coordinators. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Blake, and to all of our speakers and everyone who's joined us in the audience today. Everyone will receive an on-demand copy of today's session via email within the next 24 hours. And if you have any feedback or further questions, please drop us an email and we'll come back to you right away. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the rest of the week. Don't forget, the final networking session is taking place tomorrow. We also have another panel discussion taking place tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and will consist of a discussion on Every Voice Matters, Diversity in Construction. To close out the webinar, I'd just like to leave you with a video from our final sponsor for today, Lixil.
Right now, at this very moment, there are hundreds of millions of people using an American standard product. In schools, hospitals, at home, even stadiums. And the best part? None of them are thinking about American standard. This is exactly how we want it. Because our goal has always been to make beautiful, reliable products that fit into your life so well, you hardly seem to notice them at all.